with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a phenomenal show coming right up with special guest Reich. And he's here today to talk to us about his new book, The Ever-Curious Gardener, Using a Little Natural Science for a Much Better Garden. Now, Lee dove into gardening a decade ago, initially with one foot in academia as an agricultural scientist with the USDA and then Cornell University, and then one foot in the field in the organic field. Lee left academia to lecture, consult, and write, and he's the author of many books on farming, organic farming, and landscaping. Lee has a PhD in horticulture from the University of Maryland, an MS in soil science, and a BA in chemistry from the University of Wisconsin. So let's welcome to the show, Lee.
Glad to be here.
It's such a joy to have you here, and what a fabulous book. I just love it.
Oh, thanks.
Oh, well, and so I get emails and letters from our listeners all the time wanting to know what start people on their path. So how did you even become this garden guru?
I guess I wouldn't be so bold as to classify myself as a garden guru, but I did become a maniacal gardener, and I have learned a lot about gardening, and I do teach it sometimes. But anyway, my path started. I wish I could say exactly why. I'm not sure why. I know how. That at some point in my life, I was studying chemistry in graduate school, and I decided not to continue it. And I ended up living in Vermont for a year, and I started reading about gardening a lot, and I caught the gardening bug. And then all of a sudden, I jumped into it wholeheartedly. I went to graduate school in agriculture. I started gardening like a maniac, and I started reading everything I could get my hands on about gardening, and started talking and visiting a lot of gardeners. And that was my genesis, and I'm not sure, maybe there was something in me that caused that. There's some switch that was waiting to be turned on.
It sounds like you're very passionate about what you do, and it's easy to see by your book and the work that you do as well. And so it's always fun to see people follow their passion and bring that to life, and also share it with other people like you are in your book, The Ever-Curious Gardener. When you started to decide, okay, I'm going to get this together, I'm going to get this book together, how long did it take for you to do the research, or is this kind of the life journey that you've been on?
Well, it was sort of ongoing. At some point while I was gardening, in my book, in the introduction, I think it is, I mentioned that one day I was turning my compost pile, adding material to my compost pile, and I was thinking about what I was adding, how much of each thing I was adding, how I was adjusting for air within the pile and moisture, and just hit me all of a sudden that all that I was doing, both subconsciously and consciously, was reflecting what I had learned, both academically and from my reading and from my experience. And I just realized that there was so much science involved, but really interesting and really practical science, that I thought that'd be a good topic for a book. And then over a period of time, I started thinking of different topics different scientific concepts that I often apply while I'm gardening that could be useful to other gardeners too. Basically you have this concept and you learn about it, which I think in itself could be very interesting, but then it has the added benefit of having a practical result out in the garden.
Well, it's so interesting when you talk about composting. It seems like a lot of people, if they're new to it, maybe they're not quite sure what they need to do or how that should look. So having some direction in regards to doing that and moving forward is a big deal, because I know it can't be too acidic, and there are certain qualities that you look for.
Yeah, although I've taught a number of courses. I do workshops right here at my, what I call Farmden, on composting, but the one thing after I go through all the theory, and a lot of gardeners read about this, a certain amount of browns, they say, and greens, high nitrogen material and high carbon material. Say that the bottom line is that if you make a pile of any organic material, no matter what you do, it will eventually turn to compost. I have a bumper sticker on the back of my truck that says "Compost happens." So you can do things. You can do things to speed it up, or to affect it in various ways. but no matter what you do, it will become compost.
Well, and let's talk a little bit about your farm den. What is that like? Is that multi-acres? What is it like, so you can give our listeners kind of an inside scoop on what it is like to be there?
Okay, well, when I started out, when I bought my house, I had 3/4 of an acre around the house, and I had planted some fruit trees, some vegetables, of course, and some ornamentals, and I had some lawn, and that was a garden, and it's very manageable and easy to take care of. And then I was always lusting after this field right to my south that was a little over 2 acres, and so I finally, actually, the woman who owned the acreage, it was sold to me, and so when I expanded, instead of having 2 of, I grow a lot of fruits, because that's one of the plants I really love to grow, and I grow a lot of unusual fruits such as pawpaws. And so instead of having 2 pawpaw trees, which I planted 20. And I also grow hardy kiwi fruits. So instead of having 2, I plant 20. I figured since I write about gardening, it'd be good I could do some research with these plants. So basically, I perhaps went overboard in planting a lot of different things, and a lot of them. And at that point, I figured this is no longer a garden. On the other hand, it wasn't really a farm, so I called it a farm den. So basically, it's a lot of everything.
A combination of it all. Yeah.
Yeah, it's this time of year especially, it's a lot of things to keep track of.
I can imagine. I mean, I've had small gardens in different cities that I've lived in, and one ended up looking like a jungle by the time I was done planting everything. So they can kind of take over if you're not careful.
Yeah, but on the other hand, I keep looking out the window, and it's really pretty, and I get great tasting fruits and vegetables, and it smells nice, and it's quite a joy. But it's a lot of work. The farm part, the garden part was more manageable.
Well, and so and I'm glad you brought up, just like the aroma and with the fruits and vegetables that you have, they're different than what most people will pick up in the grocery store. And I think a lot of people are looking to get back to basics, where they can, have their food, have that nutrition and that flavor. And you say we can do both.
Oh, yeah. I think that's one of the main reasons I do this. One reason is because the flavor they can get from choosing what type of, say, bean or apple or whatever it is that you grow, choosing the variety. You can choose the best tasting variety, not the best commercial variety, and you can grow them, you can pick them at their peak of perfection, and it's so rewarding. I mean, it's fun to do, and it's also, it's really hard to, just go to a supermarket and buy stuff after that, because it just doesn't taste as good. Even, I was, a number of years ago, I was traveling in Italy, and I went to a farmer's market, and I bought some beans and tomatoes, and then cooked up and made a dish. And I have to say that at home, I eat much, much better, even though this was Italy. But, as I said, I don't think everybody should do it at a farm den scale, do it at a garden scale. What I tell people, I often have tours or workshops here at my farm den, and the first thing I tell people, I says, don't do this at home. But I'm half kidding. I mean, a lot of people do, and they like it. But some people don't have the time or that much interest. But still, just to plant a little something. I mean, it's great therapy. It's great for flavor. It's good for nutrition. You don't have to worry about what your food's been sprayed with, or what it came from, or what microorganisms it's infected with. Basically, it's all good.
Well, and for our listeners that are starting out, they're saying, hey, that sounds great. I've purchased the book, The Ever Curious Gardener. Do you have tips for them on, how they should, select like the different trees that they're going to plant, or is it something they should do from seed? And I know there's talk in regards to doing that different ways.
Yeah, I talk about certain plants you can grow from seed when you're talking about trees, and certain plants, for instance, if you wanted to grow an apple tree, do not start by planting apple seed. first of all, it'll take maybe 10 years before you get fruit from it. And secondly, the seed, since the seed represents the mingling of both whatever pollen happened to land on the flower and fertilize the egg, it's not going to be the seed won't produce the same fruit. The tree grown from the seed won't produce the same fruit as the fruit that you got the seed from. And it very likely will be much, much worse with apples. They say there's 1 in 10,000 chance that it would be as good as the apple you took it from. But there are some other things you can grow from seed. For instance, I know a woman near here, this very elderly lady that grows peaches, and she just planted peach seeds because peaches are self-pollinating, so they don't vary as much as apples, which need to be cross-pollinated. So she plants seeds, and she had some of the, I have to say, they weren't beautiful peaches like you see in the supermarket, but they were the best tasting peaches I've had in a long time.
Gotta love that. It's nothing better than having a really good peach. And I know from, before I was living in like Denver, Colorado, and when they have some areas that grow peaches, a lot of the stuff, the fruits and vegetables come in frozen, or come in when they're picked green. So you kind of lose all that. So there's still hope for people that live in those areas. They can get your book and then also look at developing their own garden in their own area.
Yeah. And in the book, I also talk about certain seeds. There's some. I tell you a little about cloning in the book, which sounds sort of like Frankenstein to some people. But cloning is really just making a genetic replica of whatever plant you have, and it's done all the time. Every Macintosh apple tree is a clone of the original Macintosh apple tree. And if you've ever taken a cutting of a house plant and rooted it in water or in soil, that's cloning, because that rooted plant will be genetically the same exactly as the mother plant. So, and it's interesting that certain plants, and I mentioned this in the book, citrus, you could grow from seed. It would take a long time to get fruit, unless you live in the south where you can plant it outside. But if you plant citrus from seed, citrus often has seeds that don't represent the union of pollen and egg cells. They're actually derived only from the tissue of the mother plant. So the seeds actually, this is one of the few cases where the seeds actually are clones of the mother plant. So if you plant citrus seed, many of the seeds will make exact replicas of the mother plant.
So if you really like a different, like let's say you have a really good Meyer lemon that you're like, gosh, I could use this for recipes. You can plant those seeds and eventually have that same experience.
Right. Although Meyer lemons, I have to say, I do grow them indoors in pots, and they're very easy to root from cuttings. So you get I have a cutting, actually I'm looking at it right now, it's about 7 inches high and has 3 flowers on it. Whereas planting seed, it might take 10 years.
Yeah, I kind of cut down on some of the time there. Because eventually people do want to see some kind of, some outcome to their gardening, so it's not so much feeling like chaos.
Right. It's just, it's certain. The thing about gardening is, there's so much natural evolution that occurred that makes plants want to grow. So basically, if you knew nothing about gardening and you wanted to have a garden, and you just put a seed in the ground, there's a really good chance it'll grow and do well. But on the other hand, if you learn a little about gardening, you can make sure that it has a better chance of growing, and maybe make it grow better, and maybe make it have better tasting, whatever it's going to bear. And then this is one of the points in the book. If you know a little of the science behind the natural science of what's happening, you can do that even more, make better plants. So you just knowing a little of this natural science, as I say in the subtitle, can make for a lot better garden.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I'd love for you to talk with us a little bit about soil. Because I have known people who have had acreage where maybe the soil, they say the soil's dead. Other people that I've known that have gone and where they've, I don't want to say replaced, but kind of tilled in with the soil, maybe organic soil. How important is the soil when we get started?
Well, first of all, soil is one of my passions besides fruits, and that's why I devoted a whole chapter in the book to soil. And on a garden scale, the most important thing about soil and I go into how you can improve this is drainage, because roots need air to actually breathe, just as we do. So they need air to respire. And so if drainage isn't good, you either have to grow plants that like wet conditions, or move your garden, or just two other things I talked about. You can artificially drain it with ditches or with a drainage pipe. So, but most people, when they start a garden, it's in a well-drained area. And once you have drainage okay, I would not worry initially what the soil is like, because the soil is easy to improve. It doesn't take a lot to just make a soil better. And without having to learn too much about soils, you can get about 90% of the way to perfecting your soil by just adding plenty of what are called organic materials. This is things that were living or are living. It could be compost, it could be leaves, it could be straw, anything that is or was living. It's mixing with the soil and has numerous benefits. And this would be 90% of being a good gardener. And incidentally, these organic materials, this is what put the word organic in organic gardening, organic materials.
Well, and I'm so glad that you're so passionate about that. You're able to weigh in, because I know a lot of people, sometimes they get different opinions about this, and so it's nice to hear from someone who's so passionate about not just gardening but soil and just the overall outcome that will have.
Yeah, it's really funny. Maybe it's just a characteristic of humans, but I think humans tend to want to complicate things. For instance, with soil fertilization, if you go into a garden center and you start reading fertilizer bags, they'll say like you add a little fertilizer in the spring, then add maybe a month later some more, and scratch it into the soil, and they have all these recommendations. Not only that, for a lot of things in gardening. And my goals are, a few things. My goals in gardening are, first of all, to emulate natural systems, because I think natural systems obviously are tried and true. So, and if you follow them, things are probably going to work out. And second thing is to simplify, which usually what natural systems do anyways, not overcomplicate things. And the third thing is to have a lot of faith in science, that not like GMO type science, but just natural science as a guidance also in what to do. And for instance, with fertilization, as I mentioned in the book, I don't go for any complicated fertilization in my vegetable garden, and I grow vegetables very intensively. I get a lot of vegetables from a small area, which takes really good soil conditions. And my whole soil management is I just add an inch of compost on top of these permanent beds every year, and that's it. Once a year, add the compost. I don't have to think about fertilizer. I don't dig it in. That's it.
That's easy.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of enriching your soil every time you're doing that.
Yeah, and it only takes once a year. It's not like I have to go back and every 2 months and feed the plants. Once a year, laying it on top of the ground, feeds the plants, all the plants in the vegetable garden for a whole year.
That's fabulous. Well, you talked about how we should take care of plants in the soil because they need water. What if we're dealing with drought situations? How should we do then?
Yeah, that's really important, because I think the other thing about knowing something about the science behind what's happening in the garden and being able to apply it can also make for a more resilient gardener, one that you can, as climate conditions change, or if you move to a new spot, you can know better what to do. Sometimes people garden in the same spot, say, for 30 years, and and I always roll my eyes when people say, well, I've been gardening for 30 years, saying that's indication of expertise. Might be indication of expertise, but even if it is, it might be indication of expertise only with that soil, at that location, in that kind of weather condition. But, move somewhere else, you might not know what to do, because things are going to react differently. So, so there's a number of things that I go through in the book. To what I do is I prepare for drought every year ahead of time, and which really is in lines with good gardening anyway. For instance, I mentioned organic matter. One of the benefits of organic matter in the soil is that it helps soils hold water better, so that inch of compost I add to the ground every year helps, if there's a drought, will help the soil hold water better. And then beneath a lot of my fruit trees, I haul in leaves that people, put out for to be picked up, and or I put down some hay, all sorts of other organic materials as mulch. So mulch is another good thing. And I know some people use plastic mulch, which does have some benefits, but if you use an organic mulch, such as sawdust, wood chips, compost, things like that, then you really are improving the soil at the same time as you're making it less drought tolerant. And then plant choice. Some plants are more resistant to drought than others. Everybody would probably be happy to know that tomatoes are quite resistant to drought, and some research has shown that they taste better with a little dryness. So, you choose plants. If you know you're going to, or if you live in a place where there's frequent drought, just plant things that tolerate drought better. And then one really important thing is watering. How you water can make more or less efficient use of that water. And if for parts of a garden that need regular watering for best production, I recommend drip irrigation, which basically is a system where water just drips slowly to the plants, ideally in sync with how plants are using it. So when it's hot and dry, they use more water. But I just approximate. I don't do it exactly. But anyway, drip irrigation is quite a bit of savings in water over, say, just sprinkling it. So these are just some of the things. And there's other things that you can do. You can collect water and rainwater, things like that. There's a lot of things that can be done to make the soil more, to deal with drought.
Wow, what great ideas those are. And using drip systems, is that also some of the ways to kind of minimize weeds and be able not to have as many weeds? Because I know that's kind of something that seems to always be on the top of people's lists. Is like, I've got to go weeding, or I've got to get rid of these weeds.
Oh, yeah. Also, a little section on weeds, why they're so good at what they do, which means grow where you don't want them to. And drip systems really, really do cut down weed problems because they pinpoint the water. So, basically if you have a garden with beds and paths, you might, you're watering everything. It's very democratic. And you might, so you're promoting weed growth in the paths. Whereas if you have a drip system, you can just pinpoint water in the planting beds, and then you don't promote weed growth. And another benefit of that is you use less water because you're not watering places where you don't want water.
And it helps with conservation too, water conservation.
Yeah, typically about 60% over using a sprinkler.
That's some just beautiful advice. And so with knowing that, and you talked about how you plant these pretty exotic trees. And aside from the trees that you plant, do you tend to also plant really native plants if you're doing for like a landscaping kind of area?
Yeah, I have a number of native plants, so that I have to say that I don't necessarily, if a plant does well and tastes good or looks really pretty, I'll grow it, as long as it's not going to cause any damage, or it becomes invasive. But I do have a number of native plants I like, especially among fruits, are easier to grow, and they really are pretty plants. I wrote a book called Uncommon Fruits for Every Garden. A lot of those plants are native plants, and they're much easier to grow than conventional fruits like apples and peaches. So I grow those too. Also, I like to eat fruits, so I like to eat fruits. I like the types of fruits.
I just have to ask out of curiosity, do you have any persimmons in your fruit trees?
I do, and I'm very far north. Here where I am, it typically gets to minus 20 degrees, so I cannot grow what most people are familiar with. Are the Asian persimmons, such as you often see in supermarkets. But there's American persimmons, which are a native tree. And some American, those people who live in areas where persimmons are native know that they can taste quite bad if they're not ripe, and some taste bad even when they are ripe. but there are some number of named varieties of native persimmon, and so I grow two excellent varieties that not only taste really good, but also can ripen within the relatively short growing season here. The way I describe the taste is of a really good American persimmon is if you took a dried apricot, really good dried apricot, and you soaked it in water, you dipped it in honey, and gave it a little dash of spice. And it's really quite good. And there's almost no fruit that's easier to grow. Basically, the tree does not need more than very occasional, if that, pruning. My trees have no pest problems. I basically don't do anything with them except for harvest the fruit.
I was going to say, exactly where is this farm den again? You have to drive over there and get some persimmons, my goodness.
Right, in New Paltz, New York.
Hey, next time I'm in New York, you might see me asking you about persimmons.
In the beautiful Hudson Valley.
On that note, we are going to pause here for a quick break. We've been talking with Lee Reich about his book, The Ever-Curious Gardener. We'll be right back after these messages.
Internationally recognized and award-winning author Judy Goodman works and teaches outside the box of limited thinking. Working with people from every walk of life, her goal is to empower you to be the best you can be, no matter what the challenge is. Born with the gift of seeing beyond our normal vision, she has an extraordinary gift of working with every challenge, teaching beyond conventional wisdom. Her work is described as life-changing. Visit judygoodman.com. That's judygoodman.com.
There comes a moment when you realize you're somewhere special, when you discover that each beautiful creature that you see has been rescued from a life of absolute harm and brought to this incredibly freeing place. Here's where their lives were forever changed and where yours will as well. Discover over 500 tigers, bears, and lions at the brand new visitor center at the Wild Animal Sanctuary just outside Denver. For more information, visit wildanimalsanctuary.org. Discover true freedom at the Wild Animal Sanctuary.
Have you ever had the sense that your thoughts might actually be doing something? Ancient secrets of manifesting have been masterfully revealed in the award-winning book Manifesting 1-2-3 by Ken Elliott. For the first time, the author's experiences and stories in this book describe exactly how your thoughts can create anything. You've been doing this all your life, but it's never been fully explained for you until now. Visit manifesting123.com for more information today. Manifesting123.com.
There are nearly 2 million Americans living with amputation. Many live right here in San Antonio. Becoming an amputee can be scary, frustrating, isolating, but there's no reason to feel alone. The San Antonio Amputee Foundation is here to help support you and guide you toward resources such as home and car modifications and even prosthetic limbs. For more information or to make a donation, visit saamputee.org. We'll help you live a full, active life, one step at a time. San Antonio Amputee Foundation, healing limbs, hearts, and souls.
Welcome back to Moments with Marianne. We've been talking with author Lee Reich about his new book, The Ever-Curious Gardener. Now, Lee, one of the things that I was really impressed with in your book, it talks about how to get figs to ripen. I'm a big lover of figs, and I'd never heard of this before. It was all new information to me.
Yeah, that was something, actually in the section, there's a section I talk about ethylene. So ethylene, if anybody took chemistry, is a very simple gas. It's just carbon and hydrogen, and it happens to be, which seems odd, a plant hormone. Plant hormones are usually fairly complex organic molecules, but ethylene is a gas, a simple gas, and it's a plant hormone, and has a lot of effects on plants. One is ripening. For instance, if you take tomatoes and you pick them underripe, and you put them, say, in a bag with banana, which gives off a lot of ethylene, because fruits give off a lot of ethylene while they're ripening, it will speed up ripening. So one way to speed up ripening with figs, and people used to think this was just sort of a old present lore that wasn't true is if when the figs have to be a certain degree of ripeness, or they're not going to taste good. But when there's a certain degree of ripeness, but not totally ripe, the eye of the fig, the little opening opposite the stem end, you just put a drop of olive oil in that opening, it speeds ripening. And I don't know if this is confirmed, but I think what happens is that the fig is giving off a little ethylene, and when you put oil in the eye, it sort of seals it shut, so the interior of the fig, which has some open space, the ethylene just builds up, and that makes it ripen. And this is why, the saying, one rotten apple spoils the barrel. That's because apples, as they ripen, start to give off ethylene. They start to do it really quickly, as rapidly as they get ripe. And when a rotten fruit gives off ethylene especially fast, so if you have one rotten apple in a barrel of apples, it'll be giving off a lot of ethylene, which will speed ripening of all the other apples, and then they're going to go past their prime and they're going to start to rot.
Well, that's really interesting. And it kind of makes me think of, earlier talking about how when tomato plants are in a drought kind of state, they get into, and I wanted to ask about this, do they get into like a stress state? Is that what's happening, that they end up tasting better?
I think that happens. I think the reason tomatoes might taste, they're not super stressed at this point. Maybe they're slightly stressed, or maybe not at all. But it might be that when they're grown very lushly, not under this sort of dryish conditions, that basically the flavor gets diluted by too much water. And this often happens at plants that are really pumped up with a lot of fertilizer and water. It dilutes their flavor. So I think that might be possible with what's going on with tomatoes. Growing under dry conditions or drier conditions, the same thing if you watered with water that had salt in it. Plants can't take as much water, take in as much water if it's salty, and that's why you couldn't water a garden with seawater. But they have been doing some research with watering tomatoes with diluted seawater or diluted salt water to see how they would grow. Because a lot of coastal areas, they get an encroachment of seawater into the groundwater, so then the water becomes more salty. And tomatoes actually grow well under those conditions and taste really good. So if it was a dry if it was a dry summer and I didn't have enough water to water everything, and I had to sort of practice triage, think what needs water the most, tomatoes would not be among the ones that need water. Water your lettuce, because that really does not like to be dry at all. And if it's really lush growing, then it will taste good. And leafy vegetables really benefit from good growing conditions with a lot of moisture. And things like tomatoes can tolerate some dryness and taste better.
How about trees? How do trees feel about it? I know it's kind of a generalization, but it's like some of your fruit trees. Can they be set up for going through a little bit of a drought, or is it something that also needs a good deal of water?
Well, I guess it depends on how much drought. If you live somewhere in the country where you basically don't get rain for long periods of time, irrigation would surely help. I'm in the so-called humid northeast, where we do have drought periodically, but it does rain. Might go for a month without rain. But so what I do here is to prepare them is I always plant the tree very carefully, making sure I'm planting it correctly and carefully, and then I mulch heavily. And I don't plant too big a tree because I want it to establish more quickly. Usually a large tree takes longer to establish than a smaller tree, and less trouble. And then the first season, a tree, maybe a lot of trees I'll plant be like 4 feet high or less. So the first season I'll really water religiously, and I'll be very conscious of how much water I'm getting, but I'll mulch it heavily. And then after that, the tree's on its own. And basically, unless it's a super, super dry season, I won't water it all the second season or from then on. I mean, people often, water is one of the most important things. People typically water either too much or too little. I have a friend that one time he called me up and he asked me, he said, what's wrong with my plant? It's, I can't remember what details he gave me, but I said, I think you're watering too much. So he said, I never water it. And then I said, oh, you're watering too little. He said, so I sometimes do some consulting. He said, you get paid for that?
Of course you do, because you've got all this great knowledge on all of this. I mean, I'm sure people are happy to pay you to help them.
But it is true that watering is one of the most important things, and for plants that need to be watered, people often do it wrong. They water too much or too little. And not hard to, if you just look up, how much water plants take, or you have ways of monitoring it. You can do it right, and perhaps save water if you're watering too much, and the plant, most important, will be a lot happier.
I love that. And since we've kind of been touching on trees, I know we've kind of gone back and forth on a few things, because it's just, it's so exciting to hear how all this comes together to make such a beautiful garden. When it comes time for like pruning trees or taking care of like your orchard, what are some tips that you would give our listeners if they have like a couple trees at home?
For pruning, I would say for pruning is read a good pruning book, which I could suggest one, because I did write one. But I do think reading a book and learning about the most fundamental thing for pruning is you have to understand how plants respond to pruning, because all plants respond in much the same manner to different types of pruning cuts. And then you have to figure out what your goals are. For instance, in an orchard, a young tree, you basically want to grow as quickly as possible to fill its space. You also want to bear soon, and you want to build up a good sturdy limbs that are going to be able to hold the fruit without breaking. And that's different from a mature tree. You want to prune it so that it's still always open to light and air, so that keeps fungal diseases down. And also, since light makes photosynthesis, is the driving energy for photosynthesis, and that's what makes good tasting fruits. You want to make sure light's falling on all the branches. As the tree gets older, you don't want it to get overgrown and all congested. And you want to always have sort of a certain amount of renewal, so you have young, fruitful limbs. And so the goals are different. So you understand what you want to get from pruning, and how plants respond. And it's not the same when you're growing fruit trees. Not all fruit trees are pruned exactly the same. For instance, peach trees are pruned much, much more severely when they mature than apple trees.
And they're able to handle that and bounce right back.
Well, not only do they handle it, but it's how you ensure that, I forgot to mention with mature fruit trees, you'd want them to blossom every year. So peach trees, for instance, blossom on shoots that grew the previous season. So you want to prune them heavily, which stimulates, if you do certain types of pruning cuts, stimulates new growth this year, so then next year you get fruit. Obviously, you don't want to cut them all back, because you want to save some stems this year that grew last year for this year's fruit. But it really sounds more complicated describing it than doing it in real life.
Well, and you mentioned, you wrote in a book on this, the pruning book, right?
Yeah.
So
I do take some time in that book just because I think it's so important. I was talking about how plants respond to pruning. And as I said, all plants respond functionally the same to similar types of pruning cuts.
Yeah, they're able to do better. And it's interesting because I have seen, certain trees that have to be pruned a certain way in order for it to, have have what it needs and be able to really do well the next season.
Yeah. And but once again, there's sometimes people overcomplicate even pruning. I think you have to do it right, but also not to overcomplicate it. I guess some people, they just recommend too much pruning. So you do as much as you need, but no more.
No more. Mm-hmm. And that way you'll have a lush garden later,
Right.
lush tree. Well, and it's kind of interesting. I know that a lot of people think like Latin is a dead language, but when it comes to gardening, it's definitely not. And it's funny, I can remember when they were teaching Latin in school, so for me, I'm thinking, gosh, it's dead. How did that happen?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's quite a useful language in the garden. So, plants have the common names for plants, and then there's botanical names, which, typically are derived from Latin. And the common names, are fine, except that often there'll be more than one plant that shares the same name, and then if you want that plant, it's going to be hard to get it, because which one are you talking about? And the nice thing about Latin names also is that no matter where you are, you can get that plant, because throughout the world, the Latin name, the botanical name, it's the same. So they're quite useful. And then they also the Latin names, the botanical names, tell how plants are organized into different families and species, and that's useful because you don't want to grow the same family in the same place in the vegetable garden too frequently, or you can build up pest problems in that family. So you practice what's called crop rotation by moving families around the garden. And then the other thing nice about botanical names, some of them are really fun to say. One of my favorites is a plant called, whose common name is John Redwood, but the botanical name, and if you see it written, it's a little intimidating, but if you say it, it can be intimidating, but unless you say it slowly, but it's Metasequoia glyptostroboides. So that's a fun one to say.
That is, it's funny because I think when people look at the Latin names, they're like, oh boy, that's a lot, but they don't realize that those can be broken down, and that's the reason they come together. Yeah.
And a lot of Latin, if you just read it as it's written, without trying to, English is very hard because pronunciation doesn't always jive with what the letters are, and Latin it does. So if you just sound it out slowly, you get to appreciate it more and learn it. But sometimes people sort of put the accent on the wrong syllable. I was once listening to a garden show, and somebody was talking about daylilies, which is in the genus Hemerocallis, and the person was talking about this plant Hemerocallis, and I was trying to figure out what is this plant, the Hemerocallis. It's good on the internet now, because a lot of times if you go to Wikipedia or something, you can just click on it and it'll pronounce the name for you. Whereas sometimes I know I've been guilty of this, that I've never heard a name spoken, or a botanical name, so I had my own pronunciation for it, and it turned out to be wrong. Fortunately, not too many people heard me say it, so I didn't, wasn't too embarrassed.
Oh, see, there's lots of fun in gardening, even when you say the names of the plants, and sometimes we all get them wrong, especially when they have long, genus names like some of these plants do.
Yeah, like Metasequoia glyptostroboides.
That is probably something that should be on a T-shirt. That actually sounds pretty cool. If you're a serious gardener, you should know what that is, right?
Right. It is a great plant.
Well, and I know we've covered so much ground, but we haven't even touched the tip of the iceberg with your book, The Ever Curious Gardener. What are some thoughts you'd like to leave our listeners with today?
I guess one of the main things would be that gardening is fun, and it's really nice. You get outside, you get to do something productive, you get to exercise. I think gardening is such a good exercise because you get to do everything, use your muscles, stretch, and very beneficial. So it's fun, and the science of gardening is interesting and can make gardening more fun and make gardening better. And I think that's an important point. A lot of people, when they hear the word science, they sort of shudder. They think, this is something they've never been interested in, or they got turned off from in high school, and they don't want to be exposed to it again. but garden science is practical and it's interesting, and it opens up all new doors in gardening.
Do you get a lot of families that come to your farm den, or people with young kids that kind of tour the farm den? Because I would see where young students would be so interested in where the gardening and the science come together.
Yeah, no, I get a lot of requests.
Young people coming. I can see it.
And then can make it even better, because in the fall typically I'll have a sort of this garden tour workshop, but it will be on fruits, and I'll have a lot of uncommon fruits, and people love to come and they get to learn about the plants, learn about some of the science that's going on, and then taste these fruits like hardy kiwi fruits and pawpaws and persimmons and all sorts of varieties of pears. So it sort of brings a lot of stuff together: science, flavor, exercise. It really combines a lot of good stuff.
And definitely community, because we're kind of in this generation where people find themselves inside a lot, and being able to get outside with your friends and family and garden. My goodness, what a treat that is.
Yeah, that's an important point.
So at your farm den, do they book in advance for having these type of workshops? How does that work?
The workshops, I publicize them, and I also have a list of people who are interested. They send me an email saying they want to be on my email list to be notified about these events, and then they get notification, and I typically have to limit the number of people that I can handle here, but that's the way it works.
It makes that seem pretty easy. So where can people connect with you and be part of your community, Lee?
So the best would be go to my website, which is Reich, LeeReich.com, and on there I have certain separate sections of different lectures from various places around the country, but also it has my blog, which tells week to week what's going on in the farm den, and workshops. There's a link to workshops also, and tells how to sign up for them and when they are and what the topic is.
Perfect. And I think we have a little time for you also to share the other books you've written, because I know when people start with Ever Curious Gardener, they're going to want to know what other books you have.
Yeah, so I wrote a book, as I mentioned before, is Uncommon Fruits for Every Garden, and this talks about and tells sort of the history, the cultivation, varieties of a certain number of fruits that are not well known, but have been grown and enjoyed by humans in some place at some time. And they're all hardy fruits. Basically, I grow just about all of them. So they're all hardy to where winters will get to maybe 20 below or 10 below. And they're attractive plants, some are native plants, and they're very easy to grow. So that was one book, Uncommon Fruits for Every Garden. One that people particularly like the title of is called Weedless Gardening. And that's something everybody's interested in. And basically it is a system that I hate to say I came up with it, because I drew on a lot of sources, other gardeners, agricultural research. So it is well founded with research. It's not something I just decide in my backyard to do this and thought it would work everywhere. So this has a good basis in science, and it basically talks about a system that I put together, as I said, with a lot of help for keeping weeds at bay. And incidentally, it also has a lot of other benefits, like the plants grow better and use less water. And another book I had, I was always been interested in the beauty of fruit trees, and how people plant often fruit trees that don't bear fruit, for instance, or don't bear edible fruit. A lot of crab apples, you can't eat the fruit, and but apple trees are really pretty trees. So I thought I'd write a book on what fruit trees or fruit plants could be grown that are not only beautiful but also provide tasty fruits. And this is called Landscaping with Fruit. And I have some fruits that are ground cover covers like lingonberry and Lober schoolberry, really nice ground covers, some really beautiful shrubs. Along my driveway, I used to have forsythia bushes, and I replaced them with a plant called Rain King cherry, which not only is as beautiful as forsythia in the spring, but then a couple months later, it's just loaded with tons of really tasty cherries. That's another book that I wrote, and I wrote a book called Grow Fruit Naturally, which basically encompasses all fruits and how to grow them with natural methods. And I think I wrote about, I also wrote a book geared to the Northeast called A Northeast Gardener's Year. And this really goes month by month through the year, what's happening, and all topics, flowers, houseplants, vegetables, fruits, soil, tests, just a little of everything. It's just a collection of essays through the year, and for people that live in the Northeast, it's good guidelines for what to do when and how to do it. That's it.
Well, and I'm so glad that you shared that with us, because I haven't read your other books, but if they're anywhere near as just such a great resource as The Ever Curious Gardener, I'm sure everyone will want to get their own copy of those books as well.
Thanks for saying that.
Yeah, of course. My goodness, it's such a great resource. I learned so much. Even, and I've always thought about this when I get heirloom tomatoes, from the farmer's market. Every once in a while, I'm like, gosh, I wish I could just take, do the seeds for this. And you have a whole thing on saving tomato seeds, which I have earmarked.
Yeah. It's that very thing. You get a good tasting fruit of heirloom tomato at farmer's market. You just say, we'll see them grow next year. Tomatoes are very easy to grow.
Well, that's good, because, I haven't grown anything in a while, so we'll see how it does.
Yeah.
Well, Lee, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Well, thanks for having me. It's really been fun.
Well, thank you, Lee. It's been such a pleasure to spend this time with you. My goodness, I learned so much. And of course, I love your book, The Ever Curious Gardener, and highly suggest that everyone go pick up their own copy. Again, if you'd like to connect with Lee, you can do that on his website at leereich.com, and that's spelled LeeReich.com. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Thursday, Friday, and Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.